Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Benjamin Cure Show. Sorry about the delay. That is one of the good things, fortunately, about being not on cable TV is I can call an audible. And I got to say, I'm going to be honest, those wings in my fridge were calling my name. So now that I've had lunch, I'm glad to be with you guys. Let's get started. An amazing week 3 of football. I might talk a little bit of college football if we have time at the end, but plenty to discuss in the NFL. So let's start there. Yesterday's primetime game, Sunday Night Football. Chiefs end up winning against the Falcons in the Falcons' territory, 22-17. And of course, once again, all the talk is about the refs. I feel like it's deja vu again. I feel like I'm going through the Tom Brady Patriots era all over again. The same stuff, let's keep it clean, that people used to complain about in regards to Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots are the same things that they're complaining about today. Oh, well, they're not playing their best football in the regular season, or they're playing sloppy football, or they're getting bailed out by the referees. To me, when you watch that game, it was a close game, and I think that's what gets people all riled up. But the Falcons aren't the Falcons of old. This is a great Falcons team. I have been telling you about this Falcons roster for 2 years now, saying they're one of the best rosters in the trenches in the NFL. They've added even more personnel. They've added even more talent. They finally have a quarterback. They have a really capable head coach. And I like what Arthur Smith is doing right now with Justin Fields, and it's sort of a redemption arc for both of them in Pittsburgh. But make no mistake, I think everybody's in a better fit now. Raheem Morris came with a great game plan. This team looked really good yesterday, and it was a primetime coming out party for this Falcons team. And I know they had a close one last week, right, that they won on Monday Night Football, but I really do feel like this is a really good team in the Atlanta Falcons, and I expected them to be a formidable opponent for this Kansas City Chiefs team. But beyond the referees thing, it's just not accurate, and that's what I discovered this morning when you look at the box score. So, first of all, the reason it was such a close game, but ultimately the Chiefs won, the Chiefs ran the ball better, and they simply were better situationally. And that's the truth of the matter. I have a box score in front of me here that I highlighted it, and I made sure to get all the categories, a ton of stats. I might put it up for our YouTube audience when I post this later on. But for our live audience currently, Chiefs had more first downs. They had more passing first downs, had more rushing first downs. They were better on third down. They were better on fourth down. So you see this coming? It is slight margins if you're seeing it on your screen. 22-19 in the first downs, 13-11 in the passing first downs, 9-4 in the rushing first downs. There's a little bit more of a substantial gap there, which I think is interesting, and I'll talk about it in a second. But like third and fourth down, they were exponentially better. A better situational football team overall. And then talking about the penalties, right? I have seen that no call go both ways throughout the course of my entire life. I've seen that called. I've seen that not called. It's not that shocking. But for the people that are saying, oh, the refs are totally out to get any team that's playing the Kansas City Chiefs, look at the box score. The Falcons had more first downs from penalties than the Kansas City Chiefs did. The Falcons got 4 first downs off penalties. The Chiefs got 0. 3 of them came for the Falcons on that last drive where they had an opportunity to score and take the lead or at least even out the game. This is not a refs versus whatever team is playing the Kansas City Chiefs. This is Chiefs being a better situational football team and consistently, even though it's slim margins, coming out on top. The Chiefs were the better football team yesterday. They had more first downs. They had more passing first downs. They had more total yards. They dominated in time of possession. They were the better rushing football team. Even though Isaiah Pacheco was out, they somehow had a better leading rusher and had an overall significantly better output, 120-something rushing yards compared to 80-something for the Falcons. The Falcons' biggest... you could argue that, to me, Bijan Robinson, you could make the argument, was one of the best athletes, if not the best athlete on the football field on Sunday night, and the Chiefs made him a non-factor. That is the magic of Spags in terms of eliminating one of the best assets on the opposing offense. Bijan Robinson was pretty dormant. Bijan Robinson, Nick Bolton all night was all over the place, and you saw on that final 4th and 1, he could not find rhythm, and they forced Kirk Cousins to essentially go out there and win the game, and he just couldn't. And in the end, it comes down to turnovers, and there was 1 turnover for each team, 1 interception thrown by each guy, and Mahomes was significantly better. And then people talking about Mahomes, I understand he's not playing his best football, but by the same token, he's playing better football right now than Kirk Cousins. He did in yesterday's game. Let's look at this. Passing on third down. Mahomes was 50% completion on third down yesterday. He had 2 touchdowns, his only 2 touchdowns of the game, and he had a 103.3 passer rating. Kirk Cousins, not much worse on third down, not terrible, but 40% completion, less than Mahomes' 50. 1 touchdown, not bad, less than Mahomes' 2 though, and a significantly lower passer rating for that reason. Nobody's saying the Atlanta Falcons are a terrible team. I am certainly not one of those people who told you that going into that game. If anything, you guys know from watching this show how big of an Atlanta Falcons fan I am when it comes to their personnel and that roster and just that roster in general. But this was going to be a close game, and it was a close game. And in the end, the Chiefs, although by slim and close margins, were the better football team. Look at the box score, watch the tape, watch them situationally, defense and offense. It's going great right now. And I will say another thing here, another takeaway of mine from the game was it almost feels like I'm watching with Mahomes and the Chiefs and Andy Reid, I'm watching the reverse of Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. Tom, early in his career, leaned on his defense. Middle part of his career in New England, sort of came into his own and in a really underrated way, was responsible for so many of the wins in the middle patch of that dynasty. And at the end, it was all about the defense again in that last Patriots Super Bowl. Mahomes has sort of been the opposite. Mahomes started off being the only great thing about Kansas City in terms of taking their offense to another level. He wasn't the only guy there, but they had a really solid offensive line. They had Travis Kelce. They had Tyreek Hill. They did have Kareem Hunt at one point, right? That was a really capable offense, but their defense, they couldn't stop a paper cut. They were getting run all over, and people were throwing on them. And remember that iconic game between the Rams and the Chiefs a couple years now, several years ago. I feel old now. And that game where Jared Goff was on the Rams, and it felt like we were watching the Super Bowl before the Super Bowl happened. That is very different from the Chiefs roster of today, which is Mahomes right now in the middle part of this Kansas City Chiefs dynasty is leaning on his defense instead and is saying, you know what, I'm not really playing my best football right now, but I'm not gonna lose this game. I need you guys to go and win it for me. And so far, the Kansas City Chiefs defense over the last, you could say, 9 months, including the postseason, and now to start this regular season, they have been the reason why the Kansas City Chiefs have been winning games. It's been put on that defense. Mahomes and Andy Reid have said to Spags and that defense and Chris Jones and Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed when he was on the roster and now Nick Bolton and all the other guys they have on that roster, hey, you as the defense need to go out there and win us some games. And so far they have. And so it's interesting to see how certain comparisons are being made between the New England Patriots and always getting told that they were winning only because of the referees and now watching the same thing with the Kansas City Chiefs, but also seeing a different evolution here where felt like the defenses were responsible for Brady's success initially. Middle part, it became Brady. In the end, it ended up being more so the defense, I think you could say, with that last Super Bowl 13-3 against the Rams with Goff, the one Super Bowl he made it to. Feels like Mahomes is going through the opposite of that. Electric offense, amazing. Put it all on Mahomes and the offense's shoulders. You know what? Let's improve our defense in the middle part of this dynasty. That's the point that we feel like we are in right now, I think. And yeah, just interesting to see how that's evolved. I do want to speak here about our next story. Ravens beating the Cowboys. More specifically, the fact that the Cowboys will not stop talking. And it is their biggest crutch. So Jerry Jones had comments, of course. Micah Parsons had comments. Dak Prescott had comments after the game. I want to start first with the technical points of view. Takeaways, the Cowboys have zero run game, and they have zero ability to stop the run. And I think the Dallas Cowboys have two big problems right now. The Dallas Cowboys cannot stop doing two things. The Dallas Cowboys cannot stop the run, and they cannot stop talking. And right now, the talking feels like it's the biggest... It's the bane of their existence, really. And it's the most annoying part about them because you know what? I watched yesterday's game and I was like, man, Dak Prescott's playing really good football. And that's not a surprise to me because I've always said Dak Prescott is really good in the regular season when everything's going right, even when things are going wrong, because he can just play. He can play on script. And so there's a game script for when you go down, and there's a 2-minute drill, and there's certain things that you do plan and practice. Dak is good in those situations in the regular season. Where Dak is not good is in the postseason on the off-script stuff. That's not the story today, though. My problem was Dak post-game walking to the locker room, that video coming out where Dak gets and he says as he walks to the locker room, well, you can jump off the bandwagon now if you'd like. Thank God I never got on the bandwagon because the bandwagon every single year at the end is like that meme of that wagon going off the cliff. That's what I feel like when Dak Prescott says, well, you can get off the wagon if you'd like. Yep, thank God I've never been on the wagon. Otherwise, I would have been dead about 32 times, and I'm only 20 years old. This has not been a good Dallas Cowboys team my entire lifetime. They have always come up short. And for Dak Prescott to be talking like that after a regular season loss, which is not on him, but by the same token, like, read the room. I just feel like Dak Prescott, who's always really good at the podium, that was not the smartest remark to make on the way to the locker room, even if you are frustrated and you know that the media is going to be all over you. I didn't love that from Dak. Also, Micah Parsons, after the game being asked while he's sitting in his locker room about the game plan and saying there are too many people trying to be Superman. There are not enough people trying to do enough football things if you're Micah Parsons. Like, the Superman comment confused me because you go back and you watch the tape, and literally everybody on Dallas's defensive line was getting absolutely bullied in the trenches the entirety of the game. They could not stop the run. Let me put up the box score in front of me right now. Okay. The Ravens rushed for 274 yards. They ran all over this Cowboys defense. This Cowboys defense right now ranks dead last in rushing defense in the NFL. Through 3 games, they have allowed an average of 185.7 rushing yards per game. And Micah Parsons is sitting in his locker room after the game telling reporters about how there's not enough people trying to be Superman. No, there's just not enough guys playing good defense right now. This defense is getting ran all over, and for Micah to seemingly act like he doesn't know what the problem is was a little bit annoying, I'll be honest, and it lacks self-awareness. The Cowboys cannot run the football, and they cannot stop the run, which means you are going to get dominated in time of possession. I look at the box score for the past 3 weeks. The Dallas Cowboys have not won the time of possession battle in any of their first 3 games. Not against the Browns, definitely not against the Saints, and definitely not last night against the Ravens, or yesterday against the Ravens, excuse me. This is just not a good team. The Cowboys are doing too much talking and not enough defense in general. And Mike Zimmer is a great defensive mind from what I've been told, a little bit before my time in terms of his best days as a coordinator. But this defense doesn't look like it's meshing very well right now. There's a massive gap between personnel and what these players and what the roster is used to doing on the defensive side of the football and how they are being asked to execute. And there's just a massive miscommunication that is so obvious. And also, Cowboys had a turnover. So, in the grand scheme of things, that turnover doesn't do much, but by the same token, the rushing yards here is the real gap. You let Lamar run all over you. You let Lamar have all day in the pocket. You allowed Derrick Henry to essentially run right up the middle. And it felt like Madden, to be honest. I felt like I was just watching the Ravens use the halfback dive play over and over and over again, and the Cowboys just couldn't stop it. And this has been the Cowboys' problem for several years now, where they cannot stop the run, and now it's rearing its ugly head because the NFL is a copycat league, and everybody's saying, oh, you guys cannot stop the run. Everybody's going to do the same thing, and this Cowboys team, once again, just too little, too late of an effort. I was laughing to myself when they tried to make this second half comeback effort. It was ridiculous. Ravens have a problem on their hands when it comes to choking leads and letting games get too close, games that they should have put away long before. But I think the real story here is the Cowboys and the fact that everybody now has the same recipe against them, and it's going to use the same recipe against them because, like I told you, this team is literally CeeDee Lamb and CeeDee Lamb. That is it. They have no run game. It is predicated on Zeke, who has been a volume back long before they cut him. Long before anybody was upset about Zeke. I talked about it, maybe not on the show because it wasn't quite around yet, but Zeke has been a volume back for years, probably a year before they even cut him in the first place or were talking about getting rid of him. Zeke is still a volume back. They have no ability to run the football. It is too heavily predicated on CeeDee Lamb, and they're going to double cover him, and they're going to make him uncomfortable, and they're going to force either Dak to throw picks, or they're going to force CeeDee to turn the ball over. CeeDee had guys all over him with anticipation, couldn't reel the ball in, had it punched out. You guys saw it. The one turnover of the game was to the Cowboys. It was CeeDee Lamb fumbling it within the red zone. This team, this Dallas Cowboys team, is not as good as fans expected it to be this year. And I'm not a Dallas Cowboys hater, but I said it in the offseason. This team is going to be significantly worse this upcoming season, and they look significantly worse. I digress. Last thing here. Jalen Hurts and Daniel Jones. So I saw this comparison being made on the internet, half jokingly, half not, half as a meme, half not. And so I looked at these stats, and I was surprised. And then I did even more research of my own, and I was like, okay, there's something wrong here. Jalen Hurts and Daniel Jones should not be compared as two quarterbacks, right? One would think. I believe that Daniel Jones is a top 3 or is a bottom 3 worst, is a bottom 3 starting quarterback in the NFL. I think Will Levis right now is in the lead for dead last, but I think Daniel Jones and Deshaun Watson are right there. I think Daniel Jones has looked better, and that's an incredible credit to not only Brian Dable, but Malik Neighbors. Shows you what a great wide receiver can do. It can literally save your quarterback situation if your quarterback is just capable. And on the other side of things, Jalen Hurts, who I think is the more capable quarterback, is the better quarterback, has more upside, is simply a better athlete. is not playing great football right now and hasn't been for a while. I talked about this at the ending of last season, and I didn't blame the entire situation of the Philadelphia Eagles on Jalen Hurts because I thought, you know what, a certain element of this, a certain portion of this has to be blamed on coaching. I think Nick Sirianni has proven to be inept situationally, and we have seen that through multiple weeks now. Last week against the Falcons, that was bad. This week, once again, I think you saw it in certain moments against this Saints team, even though it was a hard-fought win for the Eagles. Didn't love some of the calls there. I think most of you would agree with me on that. But let's look at this box score. Through 3 weeks, Jalen Hurts has less touchdowns and more turnovers than Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, who I believe is one of the top 3 worst quarterbacks in the NFL right now, bottom 3 starting quarterback in the NFL, that guy has more touchdowns and fewer turnovers. Jalen Hurts has 3 tuds. Daniel Jones has 4. Turnovers 6 for Jalen. Turnovers 2 for Daniel Jones. Here's another thing. I believe that sometimes when you look at box scores, you got to get rid of that. And you have to think, okay, let's look at situational football. What are some situational football statistics? I love looking at situations on third down. Give me a box score on third down. Upon further review, I pulled up the passing on third down stats for Jalen Hurts and for Daniel Jones, and I put them side by side. Jalen Hurts is worse from a completion percentage point of view on third down than Daniel Jones. He's thrown 0 touchdowns compared to Daniel Jones, who has 3 touchdowns on third down this season. And Jalen Hurts has 3 picks on third down compared to Daniel Jones, who is a perfect 0 interceptions on third down. Not QBR. Look at passer rating. Jalen Hurts, 46.8. Daniel Jones, 118.5. Obviously, the big difference there comes from the touchdowns and the 0 picks from Daniel Jones and the lack of touchdowns from Jalen Hurts and the 3 picks on third down. I would take Jalen Hurts over Daniel Jones tomorrow in a heartbeat as a quarterback. That's not what this is about. But at a certain point, and I know we're still early in the season, the stats are going to have to match what Jalen Hurts is as a player. The production is going to have to match the talent, and so far he simply is not. And over the past year, Jalen Hurts has now turned the ball over more than any other starting quarterback in the NFL. It's a problem. He's going to have to play cleaner football, and I love this Eagles roster. I feel really confident in their ability to throw the football once they get Dallas Goedert involved across the middle, and once they bring A.J. Brown back. And Saquon Barkley has proven to be the best decision ever in the offseason for the Philadelphia Eagles and the worst decision ever by the New York Giants. But by the same token, you look at Jalen Hurts, and eventually he's going to have to simply play better. He has not played his best football, and I understand that they won the game, but eventually he's going to have to get better. He's not a Mahomes. I'll give Mahomes a break. Mahomes is a 3-time Super Bowl champ. Yeah, it might sound a little hypocritical, but he's a 3-time champ, and you're not. Jalen Hurts is one of the better quarterbacks in this league, but he's not perfect, and I'm not going to afford him the same leeway that I do the best star, the best quarterback in the NFL, and Patrick Mahomes. Jalen Hurts has to play better, and a win is a win. I'll be the first one to say that. But Jalen's got to be better. Jalen cannot have less touchdowns than Daniel Jones throughout the first 3 weeks of the year and more turnovers than Daniel Jones and also be significantly worse on third down in the way that I just pointed out. It's not going to happen. I want Jalen Hurts to play better football. I know he can play better football, so I will be more critical of Jalen Hurts than maybe I would be another quarterback. With that being said, that is really all for this week's show. One more thing here. I do want to discuss this because I take a look at this Panthers situation over the weekend, and I think a lot of the internet is talking about it, and a lot of TV people will not, because the Carolina Panthers aren't a big brand. But I will say, 2 things can be true. You can know that Bryce Young was in a terrible situation with the Carolina Panthers, and the second thing that can be true is it is an indictment on Bryce Young that Andy Dalton played that well this weekend against the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Raiders aren't a world beater. Nobody's saying that the Raiders are a great team. But Andy Dalton throwing 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that Panthers team looking as reinvigorated as they were and as passionate as they were and playing smart football and being together and playing complementary football, that is an indictment on Bryce Young. That locker room, I don't have to be in that locker room, nor do I have to be an insider to know that locker room feels in their heart and in their mind and in the back of their mind like they have a better opportunity to win with Andy Dalton than they did with Bryce Young. And that is an indictment on Bryce Young. And yes, it's been a bad situation. 2 things can be true. Bryce Young was put in a terrible spot, and the Panthers look exponentially better right now without him under center as the starting quarterback. And that cannot be denied. You watched that game yesterday, and you're like, man, this team is not as bad as we previously thought. And I understand that it might be, a 1 week thing, and it might be a flash in the pan. And I don't think Andy Dalton is going to throw for 300 yards every single week and 3 touchdowns. But just proving that you can be successful in this Panthers system is an indictment on Bryce Young, who literally, not only was he bad day 1 of year 1, not only was he bad day 1 of year 2, there was never any progress. If Bryce Young was incrementally getting better, and I saw signs of progress and signs of evolution in game planning or in the way they call the game and Carolina for Bryce and the way they open up the playbook, I would have felt more comfortable leaving him out there. But my biggest problem, and where I do, I guess, agree to a certain extent with the Carolina Panthers' decision to bench Bryce Young, was the fact that he never looked better. He never got incrementally better in the way that Justin Fields did, or in the way that Jalen Hurts did, or in the way that Josh Allen did, or in the way that Kyler Murray did. You get better. You don't have to be great from day 1, but I expect progress. I never saw progress from Bryce Young, and that was already a red flag. And now you see Andy Dalton come out and play great for Carolina, and you see that team as a whole reinvigorated and impassioned and ready to play great football and win games. How can this not be an indictment on Bryce Young? We'll see how things play out next week. But yeah, I don't believe for a second that this team felt the same way and played with the same passion for Andy Dalton that they would have played with Bryce Young. It's obvious. It's a night and day difference to me. With that being said, that is all for this week's show. We've got 2 great games tonight, double headers on Monday Night Football on ESPN and on ABC. We've got the Cincinnati Bengals taking on, let me put up the schedule. Cincinnati Bengals are taking on Washington Commanders tonight. That's a tough spot. I think a lot of bettors will be excited about the Washington Commanders and will be sort of pessimistic about the Bengals. I would take the Bengals, though, to win in this spot. And then the other game is the Bills versus Jaguars. That one should be interesting. I don't know what to think about Jacksonville anymore. Honestly, very disappointed in them. 0-2. I believe they start the season 0-3. I think the Bills get a win here at home pretty easily, pretty convincingly. I don't think it's particularly close. With that being said, that's all for this week's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next Monday.